Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you're watching us from. Welcome to another episode of the Living Word podcast. And this is our special for the month of February. And we all know it's the Valentine's Day on 14th of February. And in this series, we're going to be taking you through relationships, love, situationships, and everything else in between. But we are also injecting God's goodness and biblical ideologies into this new season. Without further ado, I'd like to tell you a little bit more about today's podcast. We've got a wonderful, amazing, very interesting minister of God. I first heard about this woman actually from a friend of mine in church, and it's a mom. Usually, when I meet someone, especially when I meet a sister that is being brought up, that has manners, that is beautiful, and has respect to her, I always look up to. I wonder what our parents look like. And when I actually met my friend's mom, I was gobsmacked. She carries the aura of goodness, and most particularly the aura of God. She amazed me the first time I met her, and I just love the way that she carries herself. And I know that I have a lot that I would like to learn from her today. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Minister Margaret Odeleye. She is a minister of God at the New Testament Church of God, and she will be helping us today. She'll be giving us some messages, some very, very important messages, and we'll be learning from her on transitioning from single to married. Without further ado, I'd like Mrs. Odeleye to introduce herself.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Margaret Odeleye. I have a passion towards people who are married and married couples. I've been doing this for quite a long time because I believe this is the assignment that God has given to me. And I'm happy to be on this program to offer some insight and guidance and practical advice to singles and married.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And I like the way that you say you've got a passion for single, married, and people that are engaged, I suppose, and everything in between. And not only has she got that, but she actually got the years behind her, years of experience behind her to be able to offer really insightful wisdom. I know Mrs. Olelele has been married for 37 years, so she is rightly placed to tell us a lot about single, marriage, and everything in between. So we're just going to go into, and just to also let you know that she's written a fantastic book, and it's called Transitioning from Single to Married. So you're going to be hearing a lot more about that this evening. But also, if you don't get to hear everything that you need, this is available on Amazon, and which I'll be putting the link down. So this is available for you to purchase, but there will be a lot of gems of wisdom that she's going to be passing on tonight. So if you're prepared, we are prepared. Get your pens, get your papers ready, and be ready to learn with us this evening. So first over to you, Miss Adele. I just want to ask, when I read this book, I was really interested from the perspective of someone that has a lot of experience on marriage and someone that has been through that process. What inspired you to write this book?
Like I've said, I have a passion for people who are single and people who are aspiring to be married and married couples.
Yeah.
And it is this passion that has driven me to write this book on transitioning from single to married. I believe I have a bit of a insight on what it takes to be married.
Being 37 years, I would call that a bit.
Yes.
I think that's a lot. So, some people get married for 37 days nowadays, and we come into that, but 37 years.
So I believe I have something to offer. Yeah, I believe I have something to offer to the younger folks. Especially, I believe God want me to serve my generation, with what He has given me, and especially for the singles and married. So that was an assignment.
Thank you so much, Mar. And I know you mentioned about single and married, and I just want us to start first of all by really defining what you mean by single. I know you've got a very beautiful definition in your book, but it would just be good for us as a precursor to our podcast this evening if you could tell us who is single nowadays, because we have single married, we have married single people. So who is single nowadays?
Yes. My definition of single is somebody who is not involved in sexual relationship with anybody,
Mm-hmm.
and and which is by choice.
Mm.
And married is somebody who is united to a person, maybe a spouse, in a legal, consensual, and contractual relationship.
Mm.
So those are the two definitions. A single is somebody who is not involved in any sexual relationship with anybody, whether romantic relationship, and it's usually by choice. And the married is someone who is united with a person, a man to a woman, in a consensual and a contractual relationship.
And thank you for that, man, because I think it's really important to be able to distinguish between those two, because sometimes the society that we live in has blurred some of those lines, whereby some people are married, but they're acting as if they're single. And there's so much that we need to cover this evening, so I'm not going to try and give that away yet. But at the beginning of your book, and this was something that really struck out for me, was around the process to get from being single to married, because we live now in a very fast-paced world.
Yeah.
So I just want you to describe to us, because you have that in chapter 1 of your book, in terms of what does that process look like. Is it straight from being single to married, or what's the process?
Yes, this book actually is like a preparatory book for marriage. And there are some processes that is expected of somebody intending to get married.
Yes, ma'am.
One of the processes that you have to make the decision whether you want to get married or not. You have to be sure of that, because there are many reasons why people want to get married, but you need to be convinced on your own that yes, I want to go in for this, I want to be married. And like I said, it's this book is about preparation towards marriage. You need to be informed about what marriage entails. Marriage was originally established by God. It is not a human idea. When you look at the book of Genesis, God said, it is not good that a man should be alone. I will help meet for him. So you need to understand the plan of God as far as it is concerned. So you need to read the Bible, know yourself about the intention of God, the plan of God, and then then you can move from one stage to another.
The next one, yeah. And I think you beautifully described that when you said, marriage is from God. We heard about the story of Adam and Eve, but in your book, you also you emphasize that there is a cycle to it, from intention straight down to courting, to proposal, to wedding. So my question is, how can young people navigate through that path? What are the key things that they should be looking for at each stage of progressing from being single to being married? So within those three columns, for example, your intention, your courting, your proposal, and the wedding itself, what should we as young people be looking out for during those stages?
Okay, like I've said, you need to know the God's plan originally. This is God's establishment. It's not a man-made establishment. After settling that, then you need to be intentional having made a decision that you want to get married, you pray about it, you decide after prayer, being led by God, who to marry, and then you can make a move to make a proposal. You're asking for the person that you think or you believe is the right person for you.
Yeah.
And then from proposal, then you can begin to talk about marriage, discussing about it, and then you can go for it.
For the wedding. Yeah. And everyone, I think it's really interesting that when we think about marriage, when we think about weddings, people look forward more to the weddings than the marriage. And I was discussing with a friend of mine recently, and they said marriage is the only institution whereby you get the certificate before you actually take the exams. And the exam really comes in the form of when you get into the marriage. But before we go into that, I just want to go back to a little bit of the fundamentals and making this practical for our viewers in terms of how to find a spouse or how to find a partner. And you've mentioned one of the critical ways to do that is through prayers.
Yeah.
Because we know whatever we commit into God's hand, He's able to keep, and we all know that He has a good plan for us, plans for good and not for evil, in Jeremiah 29, verse 11. But what are the other steps? I know some of them you mentioned in your book, like connections. How does that work in terms of using that process to find a partner?
Thank you. Connections is one of the ways a young person can meet a life partner or the person he wants to marry. And it has worked in so many lives. We even from the Bible time, we can see the example of Abraham. He was that connector between his son and the lady she married. The same thing with Laban, even though he was tricky about it, but that was a connection. And in our present day situation, in our generation, there have been a lot of people who are connected, somebody just felt, oh, maybe after prayer, I think these people will be good.
They'll be good match.
And they will just mention it to them, maybe casually, and then they will now go and pray about it. And it has happened to the fact that after they have also gone to pray, they found out that, yes, I think we can for this.
This is the right person for me.
Even people who are not Christians, you hear of stories of some celebrities that are connected to each other.
Yeah, arranged marriage as well. Yeah, and I think you're right in terms of that connection. I don't know whether or not it has a higher percentage of making the marriage work, but I've heard that there is more potential for people to stay married for longer when there are connections that have introduced them. So, for example, arranged marriages, some of them don't work, but there is a higher propensity that they are likely to work through arranged marriage. So I think that's very useful to know that there are other ways to meet your spouse other than prayer, and prayer is key. But I just want to ask for your views because at the moment.
Can I just say this? This one of connection that I'm talking about is different from arranged marriage.
Okay, ma.
Very much different. This connection is an individual, just seeing some couples, maybe in a church setting, and they are very spiritual, and the Lord just give them that, that insight that these two people might be good married partners, and they might just mention to them casually, and they can go and pray. It's different from arranged marriage. They have nothing, no pressure on them. They just mention it, and then the onus is down on those individuals to go and pray.
Make it work. Yeah. So, and I think thank you for clarifying that, because you are right. I think when it comes to arranged marriage, there is that pressure to say your parents have already done this and therefore you need to go along with it. But what you're referring to, which is the connection, is having someone introduce you, but there is no pressure on you to go ahead with that, because you have to own it yourself. You have to go before God and say, God, is this the right decision that I'm about to make? So my just a bit of a follow-up question on that is that a lot of youth, a lot of people that that are going to be listening to this podcast, and I could take myself back to 11 years away ago. I would have been interested in this. The truth of the matter is, in church,
Mm.
it can be scarce to find the right man or the right woman.
Yeah.
So, what other avenues are available? Is online dating, for example, acceptable? What's it, how does that work in the context of,
The way
being
God,
with your spouse?
thank you. The way God work, God is a good matchmaker.
Mm,
You can just go to a bank one day without planning to meet the person you want to marry.
mm,
And
mm,
you can just meet the man. Maybe he is just in the bank trying to do some transaction, and you just say, wait a minute. And you got interested. You can
mm.
meet in a marketplace. You can meet in a seminar. I've heard of
Yes.
a couple, they went for a training. It was a seminar, and both of
Mm,
them came for that training, and the rest was history. They are happily married
mm,
during
mm,
the seminar. So many places, the important thing is for you to just pray and just open your eyes
mm.
anywhere you are going,
Yes, ma'am.
because you never know. Uh, you might meet the right person. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, and I think it's thank you for that emphasis on meeting the right person anywhere. Well, in the right place that God has chosen for you. So it's not just anywhere. It has to
Yes.
be God has ordered your steps to that place. But
Yes.
before we go into what happens when you found the right person, I wanted to understand, given your experience and your expertise in this field, as man and woman,
Yeah.
what can we do to really prepare ourselves for marriage, especially the younger folks, the generation alpha or whatever they call themselves nowadays, between the ages of 16, even although they're not getting married at 16, and however old they want to being
Mm.
their first marriage, or even someone that is divorced and remarrying. What can individuals do to really prepare themselves to stand themselves in good stead for a good marriage?
It actually starts from the parents. Whoever
Okay.
is the mother who had given birth to children,
Mm,
that should be one of your prayer points.
mm,
Even as early as 6 years old, you are already
mm,
praying and say, God, when this child is old, she must not marry a wrong person.
mm,
You
mm,
must be praying. And
mm,
then as that individual grows, and is being shown Christ to be the
mm-hmm,
Savior, and he embraced Christ,
mm-hmm,
that individual needs to live a holy life, a life that is attracted, that can
mm,
attract others to him.
mm,
He
mm,
must be friendly,
mm.
you know. Nothing is as important as somebody who is friendly and have good sense of humor, that when you are around, you just want to be around such people. And those
Yeah.
are the things people need to put up, because all those things
Mm,
attract the opposite sex.
mm, mm,
And your identity, you are a Christian, you are living for Christ, and
mm,
you are pleasing Christ. It's also very important. So
mm,
men look at that. I
mm,
remember a pastor told a
mm,
lady in church, he said, everybody will want to marry you because that lady is so pious, so
mm, mm,
devoted. So all
mm.
those things attract the others, or the opposite
Yeah.
sex. So those are the things you need to look into, apart from the part of the parents praying for you, but you yourself, having accepted Christ as Lord and Savior,
Mm.
you need to be friendly, kind, and be nice to people.
And be nice to people. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's really important, because what I found is that it's some of this characteristics that you have as an individual, that's what you carry into marriage, and
Yes.
sometimes that is what probably sustains the marriage, in addition to God's grace and God's goodness and God's mercy in the in
Yes,
the
you're
in the
right.
marriage. Because sometimes in marriage, and we will come to the marriage part, we just want to make sure that we've satisfied the singles,
Mm.
that you need a good sense of humor when it comes to conflict resolution. You
Yeah.
need to be able to communicate with your spouse, when there are important decisions to be made or when there is a disagreement. You need to be able to communicate effectively without
Yeah.
any emotions, without being rude. So I think you're right in the sense that, it's all this qualities that you have as a single person, being friendly, being pious, that you carry into marriage to
Yeah.
help
Mhm.
sustain that marriage. So just going back really quickly, because I want to make sure that we've given enough details to the single people, in terms of that courting and being able to find a spouse. So we've discussed around making sure that you're meeting your spouse at the right place, you're engaging prayers. How important is it to marry someone that is of the same faith as you, that is a Christian? Why is it so important?
It's fundamental
Mm.
because the Bible says, do not be unequally yoked
Mm-hmm.
with unbelievers.
Mm.
Unequally yoked comes in when you are a Christian and the other person is not.
Mm.
And the way you see life will be different.
Mm.
And so when you now go into marriage with different perspectives about life, there's likely to be friction.
And fundamental to that is making sure that you don't go into a marriage with someone that is unequally yoked, someone with a
Yes.
different beliefs. And I like the way that you've highlighted that that could later lead into problems in the marriage. Okay.
Yeah.
Mm.
Because the way you as a Christian will want to resolve a problem, it
Mm.
will not be exactly the same way somebody of a different faith will resolve a problem.
Mm.
And there is no way you will avoid problem in marriage. They will come.
Yeah.
But when you have the same faith, when you have the same faith, you can look at it together
Mm.
and say, look here, we have this problem, but let's pray about it.
Let's pray about it. Mm.
For the other person, if it's not a Christian, they will just say, well, what is it about prayer? Let's say finger crossed, let's see how it goes.
Mm.
So, but so and decisions that you make in the home also
Mm.
comes from the type of faith that you have.
The decisions you make
You
comes
make,
from the
say,
type of
the
faith you.
upbringing of the children. How do we bring up these children? The other
Mm.
person, if it's of a different faith, you want to bring up their children in a particular way, and the other one
Mm.
want to bring him or her in a different way, and there will be
Mm.
conflict. In fact, the children will be confused.
Mm.
So it's very important for you to marry a person of the same faith.
Thank you so much, man. Because I when I read that chapter in your book, it really brought to life to me that actually it is not an option to
Mm.
marry someone with a different faith to you because of the reasons that you've given in your book. And if anyone would like to know more about that, I would really encourage you to read the book, and especially the chapter on marrying into the same faith, because it establishes some fundamental reasons why you should marry someone with the same faith as you and not be unequally yoked with unbelievers. So I'll just leave that there because there is an extensive explanation on that particular section in the book. Let's go really quick, and then I think we're going to leave the singles at this junction after this. Let's
Can
go
I,
to
can I really
the wedding.
Can I really mention a little bit about something for the single too? Your
Yes.
wardrobe, how you dress yourself is very important.
Mm, mm,
As a Christian lady, you are not supposed to be wearing revealing clothes.
mm.
And such things put off some men who have a very high principle about the type of person they want to marry. So you
Yeah,
need to compose yourself and dress well. Dress the way you want to be addressed.
addressed. Yeah, I remember
That is very
that
key.
line. Yeah.
Another thing is what you read, the
Mm,
novels,
mm,
the what you watch on the social
mm,
media is very
mm.
important because those things forms your thought process. And
Oh.
what
Mm,
you read, what you watch
mm,
forms your thought process, and if your thought is already polluted, when the right
mm,
person come, you might not be able to quickly notice that this person is for me. Maybe you have always been watching things on the social media of people who post to be rich and have everything, flashy cars. And when the right person comes and you look at him, in fact, he cannot even buckle his shoe and he can put on just any shirts. And the person is making a proposal, he likes you. And you are thinking, oh no, I don't think I can marry this one. In fact, he cannot even dress well. So, and some people have missed their rightful partner through that. Because some men, not all of them, they don't tend to be careful about their dressing. Very serious. They really want a wife. And so when they come to church, for example, they just dress anyhow. And if you are the one who has been, watching all those bad movies and things like that, you won't be able to recognize the right person.
And I think that's really important, because in the day and age that we're in, there is a lot of revealing going on in the society that we live in, more so because maybe because people don't have a moral standard. There are lots of moral standards around us. We have the celebrities that are influencing.
Yes.
We have we have the influencers themselves, and then we have the church that is influencing, and we need to make sure that the voice of the church in terms of this morality is actually stronger and louder than anything else that might be influencing the world. And I'm glad you mentioned around the dressing, because sometimes that has it's been a bit of a challenge in the community and in the society that we live in.
Yeah.
So I think the other thing that I wanted to just touch on for our singles was around what sort of, how did I navigate? Because a lot of some singles, I'm not going to say a lot of singles, some singles, they may not necessarily have come from a home whereby the parents are in love with each other. Some of them have come from broken homes, and they found themselves in church, and they found someone, and they want to get married, and they haven't necessarily had that northern star from their parents in terms of expectations of what marriage could be like. So how can they navigate that path in terms of understanding where to get the information, the practical information around what marriage should be like? So, for example, we do counseling in church, but is that enough?
The counseling in church is good, but that's why they need to read books like this that I have written. They need to read it, and they can, school themselves on those things that are very important for them to know in marriage. Like I had a story of a lady. She got married, but it appears she doesn't know much about what marriage entails, and she married. And according to the story, they said for 6 months, he did not allow the husband to touch her after wedding.
Wow.
And the man was keeping it, she was keeping it. Also, she didn't tell her parents. Until it got to a stage, the man was fed up. It became messy, and the family intervened, but it was too late.
It's too late.
And the marriage came to an halt. The man divorced her. So
that's
why,
tragic, especially when it's a Christian marriage, but it's also
the
equipping
person
us.
So that's why it's very important to school yourself about what marriage entails. If you don't have the opportunity with your parents, then read books like Transitioning from Single to Married and other Christian books on marriage.
Yes, well.
You'll be at a better place.
Yeah, definitely. And I know you've got a lot of nuggets of wisdom in the book in terms of that marriage advice, making sure that you are aware of the devices of the devil. And I like the part whereby you also mentioned that you should try to seek counsel at the earliest opportunity, especially when before you know who to marry, so that if you have your pastor and his wife, or people in your community that have been married for a long time, you can also ask them, what does marriage look like? How do you start navigating these parts of marriage? Okay, I think we are going to leave our singles there. and we're going to take a short break. And part 2 of this podcast, we're going to be looking at the married couples themselves.
Yeah.
I told you Mrs. Odeleye is passionate about this area, and I like to hear from experts in their field, and not just any ordinary expert. Experts that actually they've got the t-shirt, they've got the years of experience behind them. So stay tuned and join us for our next episode, where we'll be giving some nuggets of wisdom to married people. Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're joining us from, and welcome to this next episode of our Valentine special. If you watch our previous episode, you would have seen that we have Mrs. Odeleye, a seasoned teacher and minister at the New Testament Church. Our particular calling is really in the area of relationships, singles, married, and we have the privilege of having her with us this afternoon. So without further ado, I know you're all dying to ask questions around marriage. As we all know, marriage is a minefield. I just feel like sometimes what you get is not necessarily what you hope for, may not necessarily be what you get, because marriage is being painted as, Cinderella, so many images in the society, in the media, about what marriage should be like. But we know, and I know, that we need someone with a lot of experience to really tell us what is the beginning and what's the journey like when it comes to marriage. So I'm going to go back to Mrs. Odeleye and just if you can introduce yourself to speakers that to our viewers that were not able to watch the first episode. I think that would be helpful.
Yes, good day, everyone. My name is Margaret Odeleye. I have a strong passion to young people and married couples. I've been married for many years, and I have quite a lot of experience. This is not something I read, but this which I've actually experienced, and I've been taught by the Lord how this can be handled. Not that I know everything, but I know God has given me some knowledge.
Yes, ma'am.
Practical knowledge about marriage.
And 37 years of experience
So
in it.
so that's just me.
Thank you so much, man. I just want to emphasize the 37 years of marriage, because that's not an easy feat in the society that we live in today. So I really appreciate you coming onto the podcast to educate us, to inform us, and to actually encourage us that marriage is something that is created for God, by God. I just want to dive into some of the realities of marriage. I think nowadays there is a perception, and there is a perception that marriage is a bed of roses. Is that the case?
Not really. That would be a deceit to say that. Can I just establish the fact that marriage is between a man and a woman?
Yes, ma'am. 100%.
Yes, so we need to understand that. The marriage we are talking about is between a man and a woman. When you look at the beginning, God, when Adam slept, God took a rib out of Adam and made a woman and brought that woman, Eve, to Adam. So it's a marriage between a man and a woman. So I want us to put that at the background, that's
Yes,
what we
that's
are
something
talking about.
That's fundamental to our discussion today, that the marriage is between a man and a woman. But yeah, thank you for clarifying that, Ma. But in your 37 years of marriage, and in terms of your advice to people that they just got married, they're looking to get married, or they've even been married for 10 years, how does this view of marriage as a bed of roses, how does it compare to the reality of people actually being married for that long?
Marriage is sweet. And the idea that the fact that two of you working together as a team, one of the sweetest things I can see in marriage. both of you working towards a goal.
Mm.
That's one of the things that makes marriage, attractive. But in marriage, because you come from different backgrounds, brought up by different parents, your perceptions in life, they may not be exactly the same. Because of that, there will be frictions. So what I will advise people when they go into marriage, the fact that marriage is good, is sweet, they need to be patient with one another. Patience is golden. And I will put patient endurance. If you are patient with your partner, you may not like some of the things, the way you look at things initially, but in time, when you are patient, that's the ways you want the other person to change for better, it will happen. But if you are not patient with that person, there will be friction. So definitely there are challenges in marriage, and there are different sorts. First it comes from the fact that you are different. There are two different people, even twins. They are different.
That's two different people.
Yeah.
One thing that really strikes me about marriage, and I like the way that you emphasize that patience for the other person. One thing that really strikes me is as young black women and young black men, when we're about to get married, there's always this how do I describe it? It's an expectation that
Yeah.
you can change the other person.
Mm.
Is that right? Is that correct? That you can change your
No,
husband or you can change your wife once they get married?
that's a tough job to do. You can't
Mm,
change the other person, but with patience
mm,
and patient endurance,
mm,
that individual may begin to decide to change,
mm,
make a decision to change.
mm,
Say, for example, you were brought up in a home that they always tidy up the everywhere, the
mm,
sitting
mm.
room is tidy, the kitchen is tidy, but your husband is the type that doesn't
Yeah,
care. They will throw the socks this way, they will throw their shirt this way, and
yeah.
that can really get on your nerves. But
Mm,
be patient. That individual
mm,
might decide to say, "Look here, I think I should need to be a little bit more tidy." That
mm,
change will come from that individual, not
mm,
you trying to change him.
mm.
If you try to change him, there will be friction and then there will be problem.
And what I'm hearing from you, thank you for that, Ma. What I'm hearing from you, it feels like patience actually starts with yourself. It doesn't start with the other person. It's about, even when they're not tidied up, how can you control your own emotions so that you are
Yes.
not projecting that onto the other person? And I think for me personally, that was a huge eye opener when I got into marriage because I thought, I'm gonna get married and I'm gonna snap my fingers and change my husband. But then I realized that it's not until I am prepared to change who be more patient with myself, with others, and that starts with me as an individual as opposed to the other person. So I think that's very fundamental to a stable home in terms of patience. What else? So at the beginning we've discussed prayers. So when we have a situation whereby expectations are changing in the society that we live in, when you got married, mommy, there was almost like a more traditional way of looking at marriage.
Yeah.
We're now in a community, in a society, in a Western world whereby those expectations in terms of man and women roles, they're changing. More
Yeah.
women are being more ambitious. It's not like they haven't been, but I think it's now more pronounced.
Yeah.
And men are now in a situation whereby they're expected to do more than just provide.
Yeah.
How do we balance those changing expectations on the man and woman side in order to not create friction in marriages?
The fundamental truth about marriage still stands the same, that the husband is the head of the home.
Mm,
And the wife is to submit to her husband.
mm,
Christ, as the church is submitting to Christ.
mm,
Nothing can change that. But in the area of roles,
mm,
any of them can interchange.
mm,
Because in our Western world now, the wife is working, the man is working. So if the wife is not there to clean, the husband can help to clean. If the wife is not there to babysit, the husband can help to babysit. So they can help each other. But the first thing stands the same, that the man is the head of the home and the woman is to submit to her husband. You see, we have to be aware of this present day equality of rights. Because many people have overplayed that and they have caused friction in their marriages. Especially when it comes
sometimes it's easy to go overboard with it and say, I'm a feminist and therefore, there is equality in the home here. But from what you're saying, and according to godly principles, the man is always the head of the home.
Yeah. It's not that because he's the head, they will just be giving directives anyhow.
Giving orders.
No, it's just for the purpose of organization, making sure things are going in the right perspectives. And when a decision, an argument comes in the home, you need to listen to each other and be patient with each other. But when the man seems not to see your own side of argument, I need to say, okay, well, because I love him, I will be patient.
And that goes back to the patience that you mentioned.
Yeah, back to the patient. And the man too, he might later think about it and say, I think my wife is correct. Okay, this is the way we are going to go now. So everything, patience is so key in the sustenance of marriage. And what you as a person is looking for, eventually you get it if you are patient.
If you're patient.
Yeah.
Yeah. And thank you for that, man. I really want to emphasize something that you mentioned, which I particularly enjoyed. And it's the way that you use the head of the home, that it's not so much about giving orders and controls, that it's about providing a direction for the family. And I think sometimes that can be, especially in a very patriarchal society that we live in, some of us in Africa, is almost like, you give, as the man, they give orders and the woman obeys. But from what I'm hearing from you, it's not really about that. It's about providing direction. And providing direction does not necessarily mean backing orders, because there is negotiation that comes in, there's triangulation of the different ideas. So I really like that fresh perspective and that fresh take on that idea of men being the head of the home. I want to come to the other side. And personally, this is something that I struggle with initially. So when the Bible says, wives, submit to your husband, from a spiritual perspective and from a practical perspective, what does that mean? How do we as women navigate that without losing sense of who you are, and in the context of what we just mentioned as men as the head of the home?
When the Bible says submit to your husband, in other words, it's saying respect him.
Right, okay.
And this respect is from both of you. If you respect your husband, he himself will respect you. Say, for example, like there's a decision as to you want to take, you want to do something, and then the both of you are not seeing it in the same perspectives. If you respect your husband, if you submit to him and say, well, it appears we are not seeing things the same way now. Okay, I will let you decide what we should do. It's a sign of respect for him. And
but what if you allow him to make that decision and you know that it's not right? Because on the one hand, we're saying that men, they're the head of the home and it's about giving direction. But where there is a case whereby a decision is being made, and as a woman, you feel very strongly about it and say, actually, I don't think that we should go down this route because of X, Y, Z. But maybe because of financially or any other reason, according to the man, it just feels like, no, we are indeed going to go with it. How do you, as a woman, how do we handle that?
This is where wisdom comes in. If the man has not agreed you will explain, you will give explanation why you think you should go a certain way. But if the man is still insisting,
Mm.
we will cancel. Don't argue it further. Leave
Mm.
it like that, and just allow time
Mm.
in prayers over it.
Mm.
It's because there is no point both of you arguing over an issue. The man said he feels this is the way you should go, and then you are thinking, oh, this is not the right decision. If you keep on arguing, before you know it, there will be
Escalate.
strife. So there will be strife, and there will be tension, and the children are there looking at you. So I will counsel a woman, leave the issue. Don't argue further.
Mm.
Go and pray.
Mm.
When you go and pray, by the grace
Mm.
of God, the man may later on say, look here, I think you are right, my wife.
Mm.
I think you are right. But if you keep on, because men have some sort of ego, yeah. So, and if you keep on arguing on that particular thing, you may not win.
You continue to bruise the ego, yeah. And I like the way that you've put that, Ma, because, throughout this, especially in the second part of the podcast, I'm seeing the themes that we haven't deviated from that theme, and that's first of all patience. And I particularly like the way that you put submission. I've never heard anyone put submission as is actually respect. I think when we talk about submission, sometimes the context of it and the explanation of it is very patriarchal. But when the way that you've put it, it's about mutual respect. So, women or wives, respect your husband.
Yeah.
And I think that feels a lot more palatable to me and a lot more doable than it was, because the word submission kind of carries some, you know, I kind of see it as a woman bowing down, and as you to feed your husband you have to
No,
kneel
no,
down.
no, no. It's
A lot of
respect. It's
very
respect.
I like the way that you've put that, and that's giving me a lot of thoughts, a lot to think about in that context, in terms of looking at looking at submission from a respect perspective. So
Yeah.
thank you for that, Ma. I want to go to another pertinent question that we have, that some people experience in marriage, but it's very difficult to discuss. And I can appreciate why it's difficult to discuss, and that's about sexual intimacy
Yeah.
in marriage. First of all, why do we even find it so difficult to discuss about sexual intimacy
Uh,
as Christians?
it's just because our society
Mm.
always targets sex as a taboo.
It, mm, mm,
Whereas the Bible is very plain about it. When you read the book of Songs of Solomon, it talks about
mm,
love making. The Bible talks about sex.
mm,
So why should we be shy about it? What
mm,
the Bible is against is that you don't practice sex until you are
mm,
married.
mm,
There is no, let me go, we are planning to marry each other where we can try sex. No, the Bible does
mm,
not encourage that.
mm,
Wait until you are married, but you need to school yourself
mm,
about sex. That
mm,
is God ordained, and God has also sanctioned it. So
mm,
yeah,
mm,
and the time has come for us now to take the cloth off the taboo now. Because God is saying, no, I made this. Sex is good, it's enjoyable. Enjoy yourself, but let it be within the confine of marriage.
And I think that's really important, because a lot of people that argue about sex and about sex in marriage, there is always this presumption that sex before marriage is not necessarily a bad thing. And I disagree fundamentally with that,
Yeah.
because, like you said, the Bible makes it clear that sex must be within the confines of marriage in order for it to be enjoyable. I'm just paraphrasing. And in Mark 10 verse 8, which you have in your book, where it says two shall become one, because during sexual encounters as well, there gets to a stage that whereby the spirits they merge. And I
Yeah.
think when that happens, that can only comfortably happen within the confines of marriage.
Yes.
Because if you're not married, the spirits are not going to be aligned. There is nothing before God that says that these two spirits must come together. And
Yeah.
therefore that distracts from actually all the enjoyment and all the good things that comes with sex. But we also have we're also in a community whereby couples that struggle with their sexual intimacy,
Yeah,
because we haven't, like you said at the beginning, there's always this taboo around sex and something that you haven't done before.
yeah.
How do you then know what to do when you get into marriage?
That's
What's your advice on that, ma?
that's why you have to read books,
Mm,
Christian books that talks about preparatory stage of marriage. Like, for
mm,
example, uh, transitioning from single to married. It's a
mm.
preparatory book. In fact, somebody said this book he said is a pregnancy of marriage. When you are pregnant,
Mm,
you
mm,
are there for day one until 9 months. You
mm,
enjoy, you
mm,
go to clinic. Said this book is pregnancy of marriage.
mm, mm,
I will advise people to school themselves first in the Word of God. Look for the subject about marriage in the Word of God in Genesis chapter 1. Read
mm,
about it. Hebrew 13 verse 4, when it says, marriage is honorable
mm.
and the bed undefiled.
The
For
power.
humanmonger and adulterers, God will judge. So you
Mm,
need
mm,
to know the stand of God about, having sex outside of wedlock. So
with
you
the-
need to read about it and read Christian books that will
mm,
educate your mind so that by the time you get married, and the church also have a duty.
mm,
The church need to teach the younger people about
mm,
preparatory stage of marriage.
mm. And in your book, I particularly like the chapter whereby you were able to clearly define what that acts of love is in terms of during sexual intercourse and sexual intimacy, because you had like three stages. So there was the what we called foreplay, and then there's the sex, and then the period of relaxation.
Yeah.
Why is that important, and why are those three stages important when it comes to sexual intimacy with Christian couples?
There is no set rules about
Mm,
how all couples should have this sexual enjoyment, no set
mm,
rules. But most time, these three stages,
mm,
most couples experience it, and it is
mm,
good for you to know about it before you go into marriage.
mm,
You see, because say for example now, you are together, you are enjoying yourself, and maybe after the man has met with you, and he just is tired and he just sleep off. You
mm,
might feel offended. Why is he like this? Because
mm, mm.
men, they used to, their own is very quick, but it takes the women to get through the process. But
Mm,
if you have schooled yourself about these three stages, it will not be a surprise to you that why did
mm,
my
mm, mm,
partner just finish this thing and just neglected me,
mm,
because you will think she doesn't care about you, but really it's not so. So
mm,
but when
mm,
you know that there are stages, and when those stages comes and you can see
mm,
them, you are not offended,
mm.
and then you can, know that it's not a disrespect to you, or he doesn't care about you, but it's only that things
That's the
like
way
that
they
will
made,
happen.
yeah.
Mhm.
And thank you so much for that, because when I read that chapter, I felt that that was a very important message. It's a very informative stages to know about sex. I think there are a lot of couples that are going into marriages and they're not aware. Everyone is aware of the foreplay, but that process that you mentioned about the difference between the way women and men react to different stages and steps in the sexual intimacy process, I think that's really important and fundamental to having a good sexual encounter with our partners.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't want to dwell too much on the sex, but I wouldn't be doing justice without talking about just a little bit more on expectations when it comes to sexual intimacy. How can we let go of the expectations that we have orientated ourselves with from the society? some people have expectations that is not aligned to the Bible. So what are the tools, or what how can people enhance their sexual encounters with their partners?
Well, it is very important for couples to know what they would like to enjoy during sex. You need to
Mm,
discuss with each other.
mm,
Because you are husband and wife, there is no shying away from each other.
mm, mm,
Discuss which aspect do you like?
mm,
When
mm,
I touch your leg, that is,
mm,
you are more sensitive or this, you need to discuss that. And without any, nothing to be afraid about it. And so when there is adequate discussion, and then,
mm,
because the goal of that sexual intimacy is for both of you to enjoy it.
mm,
Because at times when you are having sex, that maybe the man didn't want to do that, but
mm,
because he didn't know that the way he touched you, it might be very painful to you.
mm,
You must
mm.
let him know, no, that place is painful. I prefer this way. So you must discuss and be open to each other because both of you must enjoy it. And that is the plan
Oh,
of God.
I really, really like that, Ma, because I think sometimes as women, we're a bit shy to say, I don't want it this way or I want it that way. And having someone like you actually tell us that it's okay for
Yeah.
you to know what you want and know what you enjoy, I think that's just, yeah, that's music to my ears. And I'm sure a lot of our listeners, we also, and people watching on YouTube, they would appreciate that wisdom coming from you. Okay, thank you so much for that, Ma. I just wanted to end with just some words of advice and some words of prayers from you in terms of, for single people, what should be the focus of their prayers, and also for married people, what should we just giving us some sort of guidelines in terms of how to pray for our marriages, how to pray when we are single, and given 37 years of experience, what ongoing prayers should be permanent on our prayer list?
Thank you, Sister Mo. Before I do that, I think
Mm.
we will not do justice to this program without talking about finance.
Oh, okay. Yes, ma. Yeah.
Very key in marriage.
Mm.
And, for the younger folks, they need to discuss about their financial status before when they are courting. They need to
Mm-hmm.
discuss. They need to make sure they have jobs. It may not
Mm.
be a high rate job, but at least there is a job for both of them. I mean, job for both of them that will bring some income. They need to discuss
Mm.
that. And in
Mm.
marriage too, they need to also be open and honest about their finance and help each
Mm.
other. You may find that your partner is not very good in budgeting or keeping money. So
Mm.
in marriage, we complement for each other. So
Mm.
that which
Mm.
is lacking in the other person needs to complement for it.
Mm. Mm.
Instead of you trying to say, oh, she's always buying things, she wastes money. You need to help each other to make sure that your
Some of
finance.
us are work in progress when it comes to the finance, but I'm really glad that you touched on that, because fundamentally, I think, and in my own little experience and from my own understanding, there are two fundamental things that can cause issues in marriage, and that's first of all the sexual intimacy, and then secondly the finance. I
Yes.
think everything else seems to stem from those two fundamental issues, and as you've extensively addressed around the sexual intimacy and also emphasized on the finance. So I really appreciate that. But like I said, some of us are work in progress, and we know that our single attitude to finance cannot continue in marriage, and we're trying to work on it. But just one quick thing around finances. What's the best way for couples to support each other financially? So, for example, is it what are your views on maybe a joint account, or should that be separated? Um, Discussing finances for holidays and even for honeymoon for newly married couples. What should be their approach to that?
Like I said, you have to discuss in details about your finance,
Mm,
and then you must also be aware of each other's weakness as far as that is concerned, and make up for the other person.
mm,
So, and then you need to, I will advise that you have a joint account,
mm,
and then you have another one that is not joint, that you are free
mm. Free to use.
to use. Is very important. Some
Budgeting.
Christians are very strong in joint accounts. Every of their finances is in one pot. I,
Mm,
I,
mm,
I won't feel comfortable with that.
mm, mm,
So I will advise you have two separate accounts.
mm,
One is joint and one that you are free.
mm,
Then you
mm,
need to plan also for the future in terms of
mm.
retirement, investments.
Investment. Oh, I like that.
Don't wait.
I think some of us feel we're so young and so far away from that, but you're right about retirement because it comes really
Yeah,
fast and thick.
don't say I'm still young, I'm just only 40, I'm 50. No, think about investing, buying of shares.
Mm,
Think
mm,
of ways you can put something. You might say, but at least we are still strongly financially. You still need to, plan towards investment, no
mm,
matter how little it is.
mm,
And towards the old age, you find
mm,
out that you have made a wise decision. So,
mm, mm.
what I would say.
Thank you for that, Maren. I think that is a nugget of wisdom that I don't think we can have anywhere else except from you, because that investment part, I think as young couples, we're a lot more aware of it nowadays. I think a lot of us are realizing that we don't want to work until 70 or
Mm.
even 75 like some of our parents, and we need to start investing to, I think they call it financial, what's the word that they use nowadays? Financial freedom, giving
Mm.
ourselves that financial freedom at a very young age as a family, not just as individuals, and also supporting, making sure that that is a family goal as opposed to
Mm.
doing it individually. So thank you so much for that.
And
Um,
about prayers now, what to pray about as a single person?
what do you pray about as a single person, newly married and, been married for a while? What should be the permanent prayer request on
For a
our prayer
single,
list?
yeah, for a single person, you just need to say, Lord, help me to please you in everything I do. And if you
Mm,
are yet to be, if you have not yet had a partner, you just
mm,
have to know that God has a plan for you.
mm,
There is a scripture, I think in Jeremiah, he was talking about the fact that it is the will of God. God has got a mate, a person for
mm,
each
mm,
person. It's in my book
mm,
also. So I think it's a matter of a mate.
mm,
So you need to know that God has a plan for you,
mm,
and God will bring you and your partner you bring your paths to meet.
mm,
We just have to pray for patience and
mm.
be involved in the programs of the church.
Oh,
Serve the Lord. And while you are serving the
okay.
Lord will connect you
Mm,
with the right person. And then
mm,
for the married couples, what we need to pray for is patience.
mm.
I'm telling you, we cannot overemphasize patience. Lord, give me
Patience.
patience.
Mm,
And the Bible said it categorically, said, be patient with all men.
mm,
So God, give me patience.
mm,
Help me to love my husband. Help me to
mm,
love my wife. When I talk about love, I'm not talking about kissing and hugging. They are good. They are very
mm,
good. I'm talking about practical love. And that
mm,
is in 1 Corinthians 13. The
mm,
love is patient and
mm.
kind.
I think that's a very good Bible reference to end on. And I particularly asked that question because when I read your book, there were some not just amazing, but very powerful prayers at the end of the book that for couples, I mean, for singles, for couples, and for married people. And I think it was really important for, after reading this book, to have something that is a follow-up action that you continue to take to God in prayers. And you've put some amazing, some very powerful prayer points into at the end of the book that I would definitely encourage everyone to buy this book and make sure that these prayers are permanent fixtures on your prayer request list in the family, whether you're single or whether you're newly married. Is there any departing word that you'd like to leave for our viewers on everything that we've discussed tonight and also around your amazing book that is out?
I would just like to tell both the singles and married that
Mm,
don't leave any problem too late before you
mm,
seek counsel.
mm,
When we leave problem too late, it might be difficult for people around you to help you. So
mm,
if you know you are struggling even as a single person, you are concerned about the fact that, oh, time is ticking and nobody,
mm,
speak out to a matured Christian around you. And say,
mm,
look here, I'm concerned. What's going
mm,
on? Pray for me.
mm,
For the married couples, don't leave a problem too late.
mm,
Seek advice
mm.
at the earliest opportunity.
Thank you so much for that, Mr. Lele, and I really appreciate the time that you've given us today, the nuggets of wisdom that, we've just collected from you, and the glory of God that continues to shine around you. And you just carry this aura and presence of God that every time I see you, I'm like, what a wonderful, this is what we call the Proverbs 31 women, because sometimes it's so hard to imagine what that means. But when I see people that are old enough to be my mom actually still manifesting that Proverbs 31 is always, it's always an inspiration. And thank you so much for
God be the glory.
that you've given us. Thank you for your time, and goodbye to our watchers and our listeners on YouTube.
Thank you.
And we'll
Thank
see
you,
you again.
everyone. Thank
Thank
you.
you.